They're kind of close. Most of us do it because most of us put up stockings because it's a tradition, right? A tradition. Gentlemen, grab a seat. Thank you. Most of you put up Christmas stockings because it's tradition, but you probably never ever said to yourself, or if you did, you just went, why do we do this thing? Why do we hang up Christmas stockings? Okay? And there's actually, when you go back, there's a really beautiful answer to that. We hang it because we're imitating somebody. Okay? His name, believe it or not, was Nicholas. Okay? And he was a priest. And he lost his parents. He was raised by a Christian family. He lost his parents in a plague when he was young. He was raised by his uncle, who was a priest. He eventually became one of the early church fathers. He's actually one of the early church fathers. But he had an immense amount of wealth, and which was unusual for a priest. And because of that, he knew a lot of parishioners. He knew what their living conditions were. And if you've looked at pictures of history books and stuff, you see that they used to wear robes. Romans wore robes and stuff like that. Priests began to wear robes that were red. At least he did. And, or pastor. He would never seen himself as a priest, but he's a pastor. And so what he would do, people didn't have clothes dryers at that time. They hung their stuff up on the line. They'd put them on the fence. They'd put their shoes outside the door like the Japanese do when they go in. And so if he knew somebody was hurting, he'd go sneak out at night and he'd slip money into the shoes of people, which is why in Holland they don't put out stockings, they put out shoes, wooden shoes. Or they put them into the stockings. And eventually he got busted doing that. They caught him doing that. And he became associated with Christmas because of the day of his death was close to the day that was being celebrated at Christmas time. Now you know why you put up stockings. And it's a way better reason, you know. We're imitating somebody. So this session today it's not biblical. We're not going to particularly look at biblical, but it surrounds everything we do in church, in our customs at home, all that kind of stuff, and even in your life. And part of our goal here is not so much to teach you what to think, but to teach you how to think. And so what I want to do is kind of take a lesson in how to think more creatively and kind of how to think out of the box. Okay? So, a premise, see if you agree with this. Christians should be the most creative and imaginative people on earth simply because the Creator himself inhabits them. If we really believe that God lives in us and he's living out his resurrected life through us, all that creative stuff John was talking about, we're not going to go and make new heavens and earth. But God was and is and always has been a creative force. Would it not be reasonable that his creative force lives through us? Okay? And I think God's creative nature is in all humans. Some humans take that creative nature and choose to do bad with it, evil with it. But if you're a Christian, you have God's creative force that's designed to do good. Okay? And I think he gives it to us in spades if we want it, if we know how to look for it, if we're willing to get out of our little box that we live in and expand. Okay? So typically, Christians ought to be the most creative forces, but typically they're not. Okay? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Let me give you a few. Okay? The resistance to creative thinking oftentimes comes from tradition. People will say, well, we've always done it this way. Okay? So, for example, why do we meet on Sunday morning? Anybody know?
The Sabbath.
No, it's not the Sabbath. Sabbath is Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Yeah.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
It kind of goes off what you just said. Jewish Sabbath is Saturday, so why do we meet on the Sunday instead of the Saturday?
Right. Why? Because it's tradition? Where did that tradition come from? Okay. What's the first day of the week?
Jesus
Jesus rose on a Sunday. Yeah, that's why. That's a fact. So why do we meet on Sunday? Because that's the day Jesus rose? Yeah, that's probably right. But also we do it because that's what the early church did. They met on the first working day of the week. Sunday was the first day that Romans went back to work, and Jews. Okay? They went back to work on Sunday, and before work they'd meet in people's homes. And from that point on it became tradition. It became a response, a reflective nature, just like we put coins, like we put a Christmas stocking up because of something wonderful somebody did. We meet on Sunday mornings, the church met on Sunday mornings before they went to work, which is why we meet Sunday mornings, not Sunday evenings or Sunday afternoons, typically in a church. But we've always done it this way. And so for somebody to go, hey, we're going to have a church and we're not going to meet on Sundays. A lot of people go, what? You can't do that? Okay. Is there anything in the Bible that says you must meet on Sunday? No. But we do. And we don't really obviously know why we do. Another one is fear of change. Well, we've never done it this way before. We've never organized things like this before. We've never had something like this before. And people are afraid of change. Okay? They're terrified of change. We are real comfortable in the way we do it. You're comfortable in a lot of things you don't even know you're comfortable with. A lot of you guys will dress in a certain way comfortably. Hopefully you put your underwear on before you put your pants on. But we all get stuff out. We all organize ourselves. If you look in some of your drawers, you'll see some people are really organized. Place for their socks, place for their underwear, place for their t-shirts. Some of you guys just throw it all in one pile. Okay? But we get used to doing those kinds of things. And when people try to change us, we resist it, especially if we've done it for a long time. Another reason is that there's rule keepers in the position of making decisions. Okay? So these rule keepers are people that they like boundaries. They like keeping things the way they are. And they don't want to mess with the things the way they are. And so they tend to buck against anything that might be new, unique, different, out of the box. Okay? The fear of complainers. I had a friend, it was crack up, I spoke at his church, and I walked into the foyer, there was this giant podium. It was up in Big Bear, if you guys know where that is. And there's this giant podium made out of some old tree. It looked like an old classic piece of wood somebody put together, wooden big giant wood. But it was sitting outside in the foyer, and it just had trash all over it. Just leftover bottles and water bottles and all kinds of paper. And I said to my friend, what is this doing out here? And he goes, well, that used to be the podium. Because it's so big, and I don't want to hide around a podium. I like music stand better. So I said, well, why is it out here? And he goes, well, you see, it was made by the grandfather of somebody in the church. And they said they would leave the church if we got rid of this. So we're stuck with this out here because they were afraid that this person might leave the church. Okay? And that person was basically bullying them into keeping a piece of furniture that they didn't really need, they didn't really want. It wasn't serving any real purpose except for gathering trash. But they kept it, they made the decision to keep it out of fear of irritating that one person. So oftentimes things don't happen because of fear of complainers or in person. Or no encouragement or celebration for those people who do think outside of the box. They're seen as dangerous. I don't go too close to them, you'll catch that disease. Okay? So, and there's other reasons, but these are the primary ones. So people who ask why are generally seen in the Christian community, and everywhere else, to be honest with you, as troublemakers. Okay? That's how they're looked at. Why do we do that? Don't buck the system. Right. So here's a problem that was brought up to solve, okay? And it was done really poorly. And this is a true story, okay? So they had this problem. Here was the problem. How do we get people who aren't Christians to read the Bible? All right? This was their goal. And they called me up. They wanted to get me involved in this project, okay? So they said, hey, we've got this idea on how to get people who've never read the Bible before to read the Bible. And here was their solution, okay? A Bible reading marathon. In other words, you get one person to read for a half hour, and the next person would take over, the next person would take over, the next person would take over, right? And their idea was to, and they spent hours recruiting people. That's why they called me. They tried to recruit me to read the Bible out loud for 20 minutes in a tent along a part of a street in Lihue that nobody walks on. People drive by, but nobody walks past it. Okay, it's near the bowling alley. Nobody ever walks on those streets. And they want to set up a tent and have people reading from sunrise to sunset for 20 minutes the Bible. And they had some handouts and some refreshments for anybody that stopped. Guess how many people came? You got it. It was an absolute flop. Okay? And when I pressed him, I could see this coming. I could see, you've got a noble cause, but you haven't thought this out very well. And when I pressed him on the likelihood that there would be virtually nobody coming by, and why are we doing this? I asked the why question. Why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense. They said this: we are to declare the word of God. All right. But is it really working? And of course it didn't. Nobody stopped to hear the Bible reading. They missed their target completely, spent a bunch of money, and got a bunch of people to volunteer to do something that maybe made them feel good, but never achieved the target. Okay? In other words, wasted time, wasted money, wasted energy, because nobody was asking the hard questions or willing to face the hard questions or buck the guys who were pushing the thing and going, no, this is not going to work. It doesn't make sense. Okay? And by the way, church life is full of this stuff. It's just loaded with stuff. We don't know why we're doing what we're doing. And when you buck the system, sometimes you can get a lot of trouble. I was working with, in my youth, when I was in another church just up the street, the one we got kicked out of. We had all these kids, and they were coming from non-Christian backgrounds. Now, non-Christians, surprise, surprise, they don't own Bibles, okay? They don't own Bibles. But these kids were showing up on Sunday morning, and I was doing a Bible study with them before church, and they didn't have any Bibles, and they'd be begging me for Bibles. Nowadays, you can get Bibles, just go Amazon, go to a Christian bookstore, but we had no Christian bookstore, and there's no such thing as Amazon. To get Bibles shipped over here would take 2 or 3 months because they put them by slow boat from the mainland to get over here. And these kids are asking for Bibles, like they were sharing Bibles with each other. Now, they had pews in this church. In the pews, I don't know if any of your churches have this, they have Bibles. Any of you guys go to church? Okay. They had Bibles there. And these Bibles said, donated in the memory, and it'd be some ladies in somebody's name, that they donated the Bible. Now I got kids over here that want a Bible. And I got all these pew Bibles that are never opened because everybody brought their Bibles. Okay? And so I thought, I'm gonna go steal some Bibles. So I went in, I took the Bibles, and I gave them to the kids, and I said, hey, you got to make sure, you got to promise me you're going to read this, and da-da-da-da-da. And they're all going, yeah, sure. Now, and I installed 4 or 5 of them, but now all these kids had Bibles, and they're bringing their Bibles and using them. Guess what happened? Well, I got caught. Then guess what happened? Huh? They were not happy at all because these Bibles were given in memory of so-and-so. I'm going, hey, wait a minute. Why do you think they gave those Bibles? So that people would use them. I have people who want a Bible, don't have access to a Bible, and they're going to use them. Do you think the lady in whose name they gave those to would be going, yes, give those Bibles away, or going, no, keep them in the pew? You know? Obviously, we know the answer to that. But people get caught in these really weird little zones, and then they just make trouble because they can't think out of the box, can't do the math, and see what's our mission, what are we about, how does it work? So, well-intentioned people minus creativity equals spinning wheels. Okay? Well-intentioned people, without thinking about things creatively, imaginatively, they'll just end up most of the time spinning their wheels doing stuff because it's always been done, doing stuff that no longer works because we've always been done, or just doing stuff that's just nonsense because we haven't thought it out first. All right. So here's the first tip to being a creative Christian, okay? Observe. Watch what's going on. See how it's working. Okay? Take a look at the thing. Look at it from the different angles. What is it we're doing? Observe what's happening. And so the first rule of observation is this: what people really do is more important than what they say they do. What people really do is more important than what they say to do. People will vote with their feet. People will vote with their feet. What their actions show you is what they really want. Okay? So in this class, if I were to go, do you guys really want to get heavy? And you go, yeah, let's get heavy. And the minute we get heavy, you're all starting to doodle and draw cartoons and fall asleep at your desk. Then I know you really don't want to get heavy. You want something a little more lightweight, right? And over and over again, you'll hear people say, this is what we really want, this is what we really want. And it's not what they say they want, it's what they do. I remember we had a bunch of people working in the hotel industry, and they had to work on Sundays. And they would say, man, I wish we could come to church, we have to work on Sundays. So in a leadership meeting, we said, well, we got all these people saying they want to work, they have to work on Sundays. What if we started a Saturday night service? And I said, well, wait a minute, let's make sure they really want this. And so we sent out polls, and the polls were staggering. All kinds of people said, yeah, we'll come on a Saturday night service. So we said, all right, let's do a full complement Saturday night service, childcare, everything, Sunday school class, everything. And we opened the doors Saturday night. It was going to be just like Sunday morning. And guess how many people came? 5, And we're going, what? We tried it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and we go, you know what? Watch what people do. Don't believe what they say. We're all up for it. But in reality, they were way more comfortable with Sunday morning. So we canned that, put that in the trash. Didn't try to extend it, just keep it going, because it wasn't working. That's when you observe, okay, this thing, take out back, shoot it, because it's not working, all right? Second rule, look at it from another angle, all right? Let's take offering. Do you know they used to pass the offering basket? Okay? Do you still, in your churches, they still pass the offering basket? Okay? We used to pass the offering basket till we realized that, especially after COVID, everybody who's really going to give, they just give on their phones. And you put something in the back, a box or something for the people that are still, check people or cash people. But basically, all of our giving is through just people putting in a monthly thing, so much every month comes out. Guess what happened to our tithes and offerings when we stopped passing a plate and just went to, hey, if you want to give, this is how you give? What happened to our offering? What do you think? Yeah, it went up. It went up. And then we realized, people used to, when you passed the plate, it was pay per view. When you showed up at church, you gave. And it didn't mean if you missed a couple Sundays, you were going to make up. Nah. They threw something in when they came. But when we did it digitally online, they committed to a certain amount to come out of their bank account every month. And all of a sudden, our tithes and offerings, we don't need to do tithes, but our offerings came up to a level that was real consistent. Blew everybody's mind. But we observed, and we said, this is how people are operating now. And rather than buck it or fight it, you cooperate with it if it's a legitimate thing. So we looked at it from another angle. So here's a problem. We're having a hard time recruiting volunteers for various ministries. Oh man, we need more people in the children's department. We need more people to do this, more people to do that. What would be the typical way that you would get these volunteers? Yeah. Make an announcement. We really have a need, right? We have this giant need. Okay. Any other ways we do it? That's probably the way most people would do it. And you get sort of mixed results. Our experience is you get sort of mixed results. So we said, what if instead of saying, oh, we have this big need. What if we made being a volunteer, jumping in, something that was really cool and worthy of recognition? And we came up with this crazy idea, okay? You can look at them. These are
Pokemon cards.
no, they're most valuable player cards. These are all volunteers. These cards have pictures of volunteers in our church, and it tells what they do on the back, how they volunteer, how they serve. And we started passing these out on Sundays. Every time you Sunday, you got a new, and there's even a game with it. If you got all 10 of them or whatever it was, you got a prize and stuff like that. And because they had to sign them. They had to go sign them. So if they got 10 that were signed, then you won some prize that we have. So we made a game out of it. What do you think the result was for the people that were volunteering? These people. We didn't tell them we were going to do this, by the way. We just did it to them. They were so blessed. Thank you so much. I mean, and then they were really blown away because people kept coming to them and going, I didn't know you did this. Thank you very much. And it created an environment, a new environment where doing service in the church made you valuable, and they felt the value. Do you see the difference in tact, in approach? One is, we really have this need, help us. And the other is, don't you want to be part of this? And most of us would rather volunteer for something that we think, wow, we're going to get this. This is a place where I'm going to get appreciated. People are going to notice me. This is a valuable spot. So just how we look for things, okay? So, third rule, ask why. Why do we do this? Why? So here's a question. Why is Disneyland clean? If you've ever been to numerous amusement parks, Disneyland kills it on cleanliness. Did you ever ask yourself why Disneyland is clean? You know why you didn't? Because all you did is notice it, but you never thought to ask why. The reason why is because somebody is thinking about it. Some really creative people were thinking about it. And what they did is they said, people come in here and they drop trash. And we've got all these guys, you've ever seen Disneyland, they got people whose job it is they go around and sweep trash all day long, okay? But they realized that all amusement parks all tended to get really trashed real fast with a bunch of rubbish. And so what they did is they measured how long a person would hold a piece of trash, okay? They just followed people's trash and measured how long, and it ended up being 27.5 feet. If you didn't have a trash can every 27.5 feet, they were likely to put the trash down, drop it off, put it behind something. So if you go to Disneyland today, go in with your your tape measure. There is no trash can further than 27.5 feet from another trash receptacle, okay? Because they studied what people did, and they said, okay, we're going to work in cooperation with what they did. And so they were ahead of them, and it's very passive. Nobody's going, keep the place clean. Nobody's scolding you. They just make it convenient for you to do that. My dad helped build Disneyland. There's a lot of people involved in it. He was just involved in a little part of it. But I got to go when I was really, really young. And I remember that they had every corner was a right angle. So when you walk down Main Street, if you wanted to go another place, we made a right angle, okay? Nowadays, if you go to Disneyland, you won't see those. In fact, it was only a few months after Disneyland was opened that all those right angles disappeared. You know why? Why do you think? You're walking down the sidewalk, the right angle to go to Frontierland or wherever. What do you think people did? Yeah, they took a shortcut. They just went right angle, and they just went like that. They began to see people who were tromping over their flower gardens and all that stuff, and rather than put up, stay off the grass, blah, 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 they just went, what are we doing? And they rethought that, and they went in one night and tore out all the right angles, and now when you go to Disneyland, everything follows a flow of traffic that people naturally go. They observed what humans do, not what architects design, but what humans do, and they followed that. Okay, so they were asking all the right questions. Why do they keep tromping over the flower beds? Because it's a shortcut to them. It's the shortest way. Okay, fourth rule. Ask, what if? Okay. What would it be like if we did something different? What would happen if we tried this? And sometimes you answer your question right off the bat. You go, well, it'll be a disaster. But it's still worth asking the what if questions. And so the more what if we start asking, what if we try this, what if we try that, you can actually begin to build some new ideas into how we do different things, including church. So here's a problem for you. There's dog poop, and this has nothing to do with church. This is a what if, okay? There's dog poop in the park, okay? That's the problem. That's the problem we're trying to deal with, dog poop in the park. So we want a creative way. You're not going to stop dogs from going in the park. So what do we do about dog poop in the park? Here's a few creative ideas. What if dog food manufacturers put non-digestible additives, for example, petunia or margolis seeds, into their products? Dogs would then become the delivery system going about planting and fertilizing flowers. Okay? Or another additive might be a non-toxic fluorescent material, which would help people walking at night know that there's an undesirable object coming up ahead. Okay? Those ideas are brilliant. Those are brilliant. If you have a dog, wouldn't it be cool if they planted flowers all around your yard? You know? Or at night, wouldn't you like to see a glowing pile of poop so you didn't step in it? And you go, this is stupid. Not so stupid, but they're definitely out of the box, right? Somebody's thinking. Okay, anything you can think? Take a second and see if you can come up with anything else that might be a way, an additive you might be able to give a dog. You know? It's hard, huh? You start going, whoa. But I'll tell you what happens. You get a bunch of imaginative people, and they start bouncing the ideas off each other, and they come up with stuff. And 90% of the stuff they throw out the window. But they still come up with it. Every once in a while, something just goes, yes, that works. All right. Look at a situation from every angle. All right. How would this work for kids? How would this work for adults? How does this work for old people? Is this going to be good for young people? Is this something that is is it on an easy reach level, or do you have to crawl up a third story to get it? Look at things from every angle. And here's a few creative rules of thumb for you, okay? Ask, why are we doing this? What do we want to accomplish? What's the likelihood of success? Will the time, effort, and money be worth what we are likely to achieve? Okay? Again, this is how you get to out-of-box thinking and stuff. All right, so we have a little bit of time. I want you to be thinking about people your age, okay? People your age. If you wanted to do something that attracted people your age to hear about Jesus, okay? So now we have the target audience, people your age who probably aren't Christians, might be friendly to Christians, but probably aren't Christians. What would be some of the best things you could do to accomplish that goal? Okay? All right? Take a second, think of it, and then turn around and start talking with each other. Let's see what kind of ideas we come up. People your age, okay? So you know yourselves, you know your age levels, okay? You know there's people out there that don't know about Jesus. What would be some of the best ways that you could actually make that happen where they learn about Christ? Is it to rent a big giant blimp and fly over their house and drop material, tracks and trip and stuff like that? Is that going to work? What's going to work, you know? What would work? So talk to each other, see what you can come up with. What would be the best way? Okay, another minute or so, and then I want some ideas. Okay, all right. Let's hear some of the ideas. And by the way, these don't have to be well thought out. They might, they might die on the vine. That's totally fine. Ideas, for every dozen of ideas, you might get one that is conceivably workable. So no embarrassment if you go, well, this is kind of lame. No, it's not a lame. It's just an idea. Okay, so let me hear what some people. Yeah.
Like in a wide read, like social whatever, you like give a time and a place and like a book of the Bible that you have to read and like have a trivia night.
Okay, trivia night.
And then I guess if you have like a group that wins gets like a free drink or something.
Okay, some prizes for that kind of thing. Okay, cool. Brandon, what'd you guys come up with?
Church Sport Olympics.
Church Sport Olympics. Okay.
Like all the sports, or a lot of the sports, and we do like obstacle courses, you kind of handicap. It's all ages can come and
Okay.
play whatever like they're good at. And it comes with food, music, like small messages within like each of the events and stuff. So
Okay.
just trying to get all ages.
Great, great. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Well, they said sports, and that was the first thing we said, but maybe like some sort of food,
Okay.
like I don't know, something that just came on my mind was like a sugar cookie with like a Bible verse on it.
All right.
Just hand it
Okay.
out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. That's interesting way. Okay, ladies.
I think just like using social media to the highest extent you can, whether that be through videos, whether that just be through, I know that we were talking, I think a lot of our generation reacts to authenticity, so like sharing testimonies, going around asking people, sparking those conversations,
Yeah.
and it's not just one-sided.
Right. Telling your stories because nobody can argue with your story. Right. Exactly. Guys, come up with anything?
Brock had a good idea. We said, okay, this might sound. The abstraction of the other.
Yeah, we said like pretty girls and handsome boys.
Okay.
It's like for guys it'd be like, oh, pretty girls are there, and for girls it'd be like, oh, there's good looking guys there.
Okay. You want to know something?
Yeah.
You actually hit on something that's really, really interesting. If you have a youth group, okay, if you have a youth group, you want to work, and this is gonna, don't throw things at me till you hear it finally, okay? If you have a youth group, you want to make sure that it tracks as many alpha males as possible, okay? Because your target audience for your youth group, junior high and high school, ought to be alpha males. Now, it doesn't mean beta males aren't important, but you want to have a real strong contingent of alpha Christian males, okay? And if you get and here's how it works, and some of you are going to not like what I'm going to say, but this is, I did youth ministry for decades and decades, a lot longer than most of you have been born. If you have guys, especially strong males, girls will come, okay? Because for whatever reason, ladies, you like alpha males. It's just built into you. There's one. Guys, if it's a bunch of hot chicks at this youth group, guys will come, but they're coming for all the wrong reasons. They're predators, like I was, They're predators, and only a few of them are actually going to get converted. And by the way, here's a statistic it's the influence of a strong male on the spiritual life, even the spiritual life of a family, is so underrated right now. And they're doing new studies. I just read some new studies that if you're in a family and the father is a devout Christian and the mother is like against it, okay, your kid has like a 60% chance of following in the faith. If the mother's a devout Christian and the dad's against it, it's down to about 30% chance that the kid's going to be a Christian. And if the mother and father are both Christians, it only goes up to like 65%. Only makes about a 5% difference in the probability that the child in that family will follow Christ. What does that tell you? Again, we're talking about strategy here. We're talking about thinking creative, thinking imaginative. If that's true, what does that say to the church?
They need to lead men well.
Pardon?
They need to lead men well.
They need to lead men well. That'd be for sure. But even more than that, they need to attract men. Church needs to be a place that men feel really comfortable. They don't feel, and so let me just give you how this works out, okay? We knew these statistics going into it, and so one thing you'll notice at KCF, you will never, ever, ever see flowers on, like, you go to church, there's flowers on the front, on the altar or something like that, You'll never see flowers inside the church. You'll see some Christmas decorations. You'll never see flowers inside the church. Why? Why do we banish flowers inside the church? Pardon? Yeah, because for a guy, typical guy, alpha male, looks at flowers and he goes, this is a place for chicks. Okay? The colors we painted it, okay, are designed to be at least neutral, male positive. Okay? In fact, we think very carefully about making sure we don't do things that are going to turn off males. We want to have a very strong contingent of males because we know how God has created humanity, that if you have strong alpha males, that women will enjoy that more, and it'll grow. It attracts both other guys and it attracts women. All right? These are strategies, but they're not strategies that you don't just do it because you do it. You do it because you're thinking about it and working it out. Okay? All right. So, again, at your age level, there's all kinds of different strategies we can come up with. And you guys can be leading the charge on that because you know your people. You know what works with them. You know what turns them off. And you can be pushing the church towards, hey, if you want, and by the way, when we get into doing the church, I'll be teaching a whole thing on the church with you guys. When you get into church, it'll be broken up into church planning groups. Your job will be to create the church of tomorrow and what it's going to look like. Be bringing some of these stuff to the table because you want to create a place where people your age are going to feel comfortable, welcome, and feel like it connects with you. Okay. And don't be afraid to ask why of the sacred cows. Every church has sacred cows. We've always done it this way. Well, why? It isn't working. It's not working. So one of the things, and again, this is out of KCF's experience, we notice that churches oftentimes go up and ask for money, right? We have this need, we ask for money for this and that. And one of the things that we're not allowed to do here, you're not allowed to ask for money for the church. Now, if you were going to Bangladesh or something and we're trying to raise money for you, we'd say, hey, this kid's going to Bangladesh, we want to support Caitlin and make sure she gets down there. But we don't ask for money for the church, okay? Instead, here's what we do. We tell stories. Because if you don't have stories to tell about what God's doing, how our lives are being changed, you're just, there's that people with resources, they don't want to just give their money away to a vague idea. They want to put money into, they want to invest money into something that's happening. So if you tell stories, what we've found is people with money, they go, oh, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this story. I want to help this. I want to make sure this happened. You guys at the Anchor House, because we started telling stories and people started throwing, we thought it was going to take us 5-6 years to open the Anchor House. We started telling stories about what we were planning to do, and people all of a sudden said, oh, wow, that I want to get behind that. And they threw tons of bucks to make it possible for us to do this. So my point to you is that we need to be rethinking, and sometimes, we used to do it that way. We don't do that anyway. It doesn't work anymore, okay? So why do we meet on Sunday mornings? Talked about that. Why do we have 5 songs in a 30-minute message? Why not 10 songs and a 10-minute message? Okay. Why do we take an offering? Why do we provide coffee and food? Those are the kind of questions that in a church context we ought to be asking ourselves all the time. When you go home to church, look at what they do. When you go home on break, look at what they do. And ask yourself, why do we do this? Go up to some of the leadership. Why do you do this? Tell me the reason. What's the reason we do this? Most of the time, you're going to get, well, it's just what we do, which isn't an answer. Okay? So being a thinker, being somebody who's going, there should be a good reason why we do everything we do, will help move the gospel forward, help you think out of the box creatively. It gets you in a lot of trouble. Okay? But it's good trouble. Because oftentimes we get frozen in just the way we do stuff. We don't know why we do it, just keep routinely doing it. And we live in a world that's constantly mutating and changing, and we need to be aware of how that is and how that works. Any questions, any thoughts? Okay. Father, just thank you for your creativity you've poured into us, for the imagination you've planted inside of us. May you allow it to bust out of us. May we think broadly and deeply about the whys and the hows of what we're doing, so that we can advance your kingdom, advance your gospel, so people might come to know you. We invite you to be that creative force in us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys. Yeah, you have another class, like 11. You have 15 minutes to go run and prance and play, skip and hop.